Welcome to Pedal with Power. My name is Chris. In this video, I'm just going to be showing you how to remove your brake pads from mechanical disc brakes without having to remove your wheel, which is super useful on a hub drive bike like this Lectric XP 2.0. This is also going to be the same as what's on like a lot of Rad Power Bikes. So hopefully you'll find this video useful and you might be able to replace your own brake pads without having to pull your whole wheel off. So, hope you enjoy it. And first thing, so we're gonna do the rear brake first, which is this little guy right here. First thing you're gonna want is one of these Park Tool P-wrench 5mm Allen wrenches. This thing's super useful for doing this. You can also do this just with your multi-tool, but it's definitely a lot harder to kind of fold this thing out and get it in there. So I'll leave a link in the description below on where you can get one of these guys. This thing just makes your life a whole lot easier for doing this, and there's other useful things that you can do with this tool. The other tool you're going to need is a set of needle nose pliers. You can find these at any hardware store. So what you want to do is right here, there's a 5mm, there's two 5mm Allen bolts that are holding this guy in here. So what we want to do is remove those. And then there's another one down here below it. We just want to remove that guy too. And you just want to be careful when you're using this 5mm Allen, because this side right here is rounded, so it allows you to kind of get in there at angles. But when you first do it, you want to make sure you're square in there, because it's going to take a little bit of force to initially get that bolt to start moving, because these bolts have some Loctite on them. I don't know if you can see that there. And then once you have that off, now you can see the brake pads on the inside here. So in order to get those free, we want to go and grab our needle nose pliers here. And then if you can see, there's this pin that goes right through them all that's bent a little on this side right here. We need to grab that and straighten it back out. And just be careful doing this. So hopefully you can see that. If not, I'll try to get some close-ups going. But once you get that nice and straight, then you can pull that pin out. You see that pin's all out. Now you want to grab your 5mm again. And then on this side, so with these kinds of brakes, when this thing pulls, it's actually only moving the one outside pad. In order to move this inside pad, the one that's closest to the wheel, you actually need to go in here with your 5mm and back this thing out a couple clicks. Mine's going about, do about 6 clicks. And then you also want to disengage the cable. So that's this bolt right here. So take and loosen that bolt. And you don't need to take it all the way out, just a little, so that the cable is nice and loose. So basically we just spread the pads open the whole way. Then you can just push them right from the top right here and push them down, and they'll come right out the bottom. And then you have your brake pads. As you can see, these ones are pretty new, so they don't really need to be replaced. But if you have your replacement pads, there's a whole bunch of different kinds you can get. The great thing about these kind of basic Tektro brakes, the ones that are on the Lectric XP, these are also the same mechanical brakes that are on a lot of Rad Power Bikes and other just basic hub drive bikes that you get online. So these are the Tektro mechanical brakes. Not sure what the exact number is. They're the MD M280s. They're just basic Tektros. So these also take the same pads as basic mechanical Shimano brakes, also basic hydraulic Shimano brakes. A whole bunch of different brake systems take these, so you don't have to get the exact Tetra ones. As you can see, I have some from Jaguar right here, I have some from Cool Stop right here. You can also get the ones straight from Shimano. I'll just use whichever. Doesn't really matter as long as it's the right shape. So you open this up. Most of these are going to come with a spare spring. I don't think the Jaguar ones actually do. You can just use, so this is, you can use the same spring, which is this little guy. So basically, when you're doing pads also, I would recommend getting the resin or the organic kind of pads, not anything that says metallic or semi-metallic. These basic rotors don't really like metallic pads, and metallic pads are typically more for real gunky weather, and they are much harder to keep them quiet. So as you can see, what I'm doing with these guys here is with this little spring, you basically kind of want to slide it onto the inside of the pad, and then you can take your other pad and you're going to slot that right on it, so it creates a spring between the two, a little sandwich. Now, holding these all together, we grab our brake caliper again, and we're just going to slide them right back in, just like we took out the other ones. Yep, and then drop it on the wheel. So now you can see that these two little pad arms are sticking up through here, and the spring is in the middle, and between all of those there's a hole. So then you want to grab your little pin that you just straightened out to take out, and going from the outside to the inside, we're going to push it through so that it goes through all of those holes and the hole in the spring, and then all the way out the other side. So it should be going through both pads and the spring, so that little safety pin holds everything in there together. Then you grab your needle nose pliers again, and on this little pin there's a longer arm, so we're going to take that longer arm and just bend it up, and that basically holds it all into place like that. And then you want to grab your 5mm P-wrench here again, and remember how we backed this off 6 clicks? We can try putting it back 6 clicks. This doesn't always work perfectly, but I can show you quickly how to adjust the brake once it's back on. And then you can also see part of the housing is out, so we want to make sure that's slotted back in there. See how it moves in and out? Then on the inside here, that's where we want this rotor to go, is it's going to go right in there. So we want to flip that around and slide it down over the rotor. And we can just let that sit there for a minute. And then we want to grab our 2 bolts that we removed. And you can almost just start these by hand. So the first bolt's going to go into this little slot right here. And then screw it. Oh. So screw this one back in and just kind of get it in part way so that it'll hold everything there, not drop like I keep dropping it. And then there's another one on the bottom, if you can see that. That one's going to go back in. And then the trick with readjusting them is you want to screw these in basically until you feel them kind of stop, and then back them off about a half a turn. So now I'm screwing in the top one. So kind of go till it's snug and then back it off about half a turn. So what's that allowing to do is it allows this brake caliper to still move on here. So this is kind of the tricky part. So now, holding this guy here, this cable at the end, you kind of want to push this up just a little bit And you might even be able to kind of see where it was clamped before. So I'm just pushing this up to kind of tension it a little and holding it there. And then I want to tighten this bolt back down. So this one's now cinching the cable nice and tight. So now I have the cable nice and tight, but you can see this still moves. And then this is where it gets a little tricky. Not sure if we can see this on the camera, but basically you're trying to center this caliper now over the rotor. And to start, you can kind of just get it in the middle. Let me move this stuff out of the way. And sometimes if you look straight down from it, I don't know if you can see that. I'll try to get a better camera angle here in a moment. You'll be able to see the rotor inside the caliper. And if you can kind of eyeball it so it's nice and straight in there, and then if you spin the back wheel forward, you'll be able to tell if it's rubbing or not. Right now mine's rubbing a bit, but I also haven't tightened the lower one at all. So I'm gonna just move the lower one around a little bit. And one thing to be really cautious with when you're doing this is don't ever have your fingers in here when you spin the wheel, because the rotor is really sharp and it can take your fingertip right off, and that's not good. So I have them tight now, but you can see if I spin this, it just kind of comes to a stop. So if you also grab your brake lever, give it a nice tight pull. You can feel the tension's pretty good, but the brake is rubbing. So you kind of just go back and forth, and you can loosen this bolt again. Try to slide it over a little bit. And what you're trying to do is basically you're moving the caliper from side to side, and you're centering it over the rotor. So you want the pads to sit on both sides of the rotor, but not actually be touching it on either side. So using both of these two bolts, this top one and this bottom one, you can loosen them up a little and slide it, and then tighten them back down and kind of see where you're at. Now this should just spin nice and freely. So it's actually spinning pretty good right there. It's gonna come to a stop on its own anyway, but if you really hear it rubbing and grinding, you can kind of repeat this process of this bolt here and this bolt down there and shift this caliper from side to side. Another thing that you can do, it's a little trickier, but this bolt that's on the outside here that moves this pad in and out, you can also kind of play with that by kind of going around here. And this basically only works with this rounded end, and you kind of have to get it all the way around the wheel and have it come through one of these little gaps there. You barely have enough room, but you can get to it. And if I tighten and loosen this, if you can see it, it's actually moving this pad in and out over here. So sometimes you can just do that if you've got this pad really good, but this other one's rubbing, and if you get to that backside one and just need to back the one pad out. So basically, if these are the two pads and the rotor's in the middle, and this one is doing pretty good, but this one's rubbing, if you back that nut out back there, it'll just move this one out a little bit. Whereas if you're doing both of these two bolts, you're actually moving the whole caliper from side to side. So that's kind of how you do some adjustment. Adjusting the brake is tricky, can take some time. You can also use the tension on this side. So when this little arm is moving, so now that one's actually just moving this inside one in and out. So if there's a barrel adjuster that sits right on the top here, and it has this locking nut that goes down. So this nut just kind of locks it into place. But if I back the whole barrel out, that's actually tensioning this arm right here. And so if I back this out, that's actually moving this pad in just a little bit. If I loosen this nut and screw it in a little bit. Now I'm actually backing that side out a little bit. So basically you can use this barrel adjuster right there to move this pad in and out. You can use this nut that's on the back side behind here with your 5mm. This one you got to get all sneaky on. And basically by turning that one, you're moving this pad in and out. Or you can use both of these nuts that are on the top and bottom, the ones you use to take this whole caliper off, and that'll shift the entire caliper from side to side. So you can see you can just move this pad, you can just move this pad, or you can move both. So playing with all of that, you know, eventually you can get it so that it's nice and even. It does take some time and some practice, but you can get it down. But if you can get your pads this far in and get it pretty close so that when you pull the brake it actually feels pretty good, even if it's rubbing a little bit, if you do that and bring it down to your local bike shop and just tell them that you need them just to adjust it a tiny bit, they should be able to do that. I do it at my bike shop for free. If somebody's just, especially if somebody went through the trouble of getting all their pads in, I'll just do the quick adjustment. Getting good at adjusting these things properly so that this isn't rubbing definitely takes some practice. So if you're struggling at this stage, don't worry, everybody struggles at this stage. I struggled at this stage, but with some time, using your barrel adjuster, using this bolt on the inside here, or these two bolts that move the whole caliper side to side, you can get this guy pretty straight. Another thing that can also hang up and sometimes rub is these rotors are not always perfectly straight as they're spinning around. Sometimes they kind of wobble a little bit. So sometimes you actually have to true the rotor, but that I can hopefully show you in another video. That's the whole different kind of thing. If your rotor's really wonky, trying to adjust this properly without it ever rubbing is going to be a total pain in the butt. I would definitely take it down to your local shop at that stage. Anyway, that's how you can put new pads in without taking the wheel off. And doing it on the front is exactly the same. It's the same rotor, same two bolts. You can just remove it, take the pads out the same way by pulling that pin, putting the new ones in, and then you got nice fresh pads in, and you didn't have to mess with taking that whole back wheel off. You can see now when I grab this here, it's pulling about halfway, creating resistance. This thing's nice and tight, so all good to go. Hopefully that helped.